Hi, my name is Marcelo and you're watching rptv. In this video, you'll see the Planning Committee in action as they prepare for the November 27th Stakeholder Table meeting, led by Michael Rosenberg and Adonis Huggins from the Regent Park SDP Planning Committee. This session focuses on refining key proposals that will guide the future of social development plan of Regent Park. You'll hear insights from committee members like Walid Kogali Ali, as they discuss the goals aimed at fostering social inclusion, cohesion, and a sense of belonging in the Regent Park community. Stay tuned as the team finalizes their approach to ensure a productive and impactful stakeholder table meeting that will be held at the UN Pavilion in Regent Park. Now, let's go to the video.
We have stakeholders table agenda. Did you want me to share the screen?
Sure, you could share the screen. Michael, do you want to start by giving us context as to what the strategic planning table is all about, and for people who don't know, and before we begin with the presentation?
Okay, but in fact, that's part of the presentation. So, but we can do that first. If it's it's almost near the beginning, anyways. So the strategic planning was intended to deal with the kind of strategic issues you usually have in strategic planning, like being more effective as an organization. What is the structure of the organization? What are our top priorities over the next few years? Those kinds of questions. And so I think about a year and a half now, maybe even longer, there was a motion at the stakeholders table to do a strategic plan. And in fact, that was before we knew anything about the city doing a refresh. So we started to have a few meetings in 2023, and then it really got rolling in 2024, where we've had several stakeholders table meetings about issues in the strategic plan, and then we had a few special meetings for the strategic plan, and then regular weekly meetings. So at this point, we have a series of proposals that are being brought to the stakeholders table, and there's a lot more sort of summary of things that have been discussed that will be referred to working groups or otherwise dealt with that don't need decisions by the stakeholders table. So there'll be more content in the report, but there are approximately 8 major items that we want the stakeholders table to consider, and that's what the rest of the slides are about. So this is going to be a decision-making meeting on these 8 slides.
Okay, so thanks, Michael. So what we're going to take you through is the actual proposal that we hope to pass at the stakeholders table. And we hope to get your feedback on this as well and pass it through here as well. But the decision-making table is a stakeholders table, but we would certainly like everyone's feedback around it. So let's begin. Can we go to the next slide? Can we go? So we'll start with the land acknowledgement, of course. There will be agenda. So the agenda items is the status of the SDP Strategic Plan and the city refresh, the summary. The summary of the strategic plan process and the approval of the major changes, and then the next steps. So the next slide, please. So this slide is really just telling people what the social development plan is currently, what the structure is. So it has the parts and the goals. So we could go to the next slide. And then this one has a little bit of what Michael was just talking about, the SDP Strategic Plan. And then talking a little bit about the city refresh of the SDP. So what are the two differences, basically? And I'm going to skip this one because Michael just, well, maybe Michael, did you want to
that's
talk?
basically what I already did was that slide, the next slide, right?
Yeah. So Michael just talked about the strategic plan. So that's what we're going to be presenting as well. And then we go to the next slide. So Michael, why don't you talk about what we're hoping to do with the decision-making process as we go
Okay,
through
so
the-
just to be sure, you've got the latest version here that has the decision-making charts on it, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so at this point, we're going to tell people that we have 8 proposals that we're going to go through at this meeting, and then we will, briefly explain that we're going to check if people agree on them. If not, we will check for quick amendments, and if there's a longer discussion on some of these items, we could briefly, I think, separate the meeting into maybe 3 sections and have people speak in small groups for a short amount of time. But they'd have to come back to the main group pretty quickly because in order to reach a decision, you have to have everybody in the same group. So if it's helpful, we can temporarily break into groups without having to move people around at some points in the discussion if any of these slides generate a lot of controversy. But the general idea is that whether we do that or not will depend on the circumstances, and but ultimately they will have to come back together before we move on to the next slide and see if we have a decision. If there's no, if any particular slide doesn't reach a consensus, then there's obviously the option of either voting on it or seeing if we can separate out that slide and approve the rest of them, but not approve 1 or 2 of the slides and have the strategic plan committee continue to work on it. So those are the 2 things that could happen if there's no consensus. So that's the decision-making process. The main step in consensus is if people don't agree, you try to find an amendment that not only reflects the reason for the disagreement, but also the reasons why people supported the original proposal. So you have to look for everybody's reasons. And that's sort of like we've obviously done a lot of that in the strategic planning group. And that's why some of the proposals are what they are, because we had to find something that we could all agree on after going through a lot of this. So when it comes to the full or the larger meeting, people might say something, they disagree with something, and it might be something that we already considered and had to reach this particular, conclusion that we had. So in some cases, we're probably going to hear things and, we'll have to kind of make them aware of what considerations we've already considered and then see if that doesn't satisfy them, then, what else can they propose? But in some cases, it might mean that we have to explain the steps we already went through to reach the conclusions that we've already come to, because obviously a lot of different proposals and objections were already considered. So that part we'll have to see how it goes, but basically if somebody does have an objection, we'll try to keep it as focused as possible on what is the alternative, what else could we do, and if we get to a conclusion, then we do. If we don't, then it's either a vote or we can maybe leave 1 or 2 of the slides as undecided for now and get the strategic plan committee to come up with an alternative proposal. So that's the decision-making process. And then we have each of the 8 proposals. So we're going to, as I said, go through them one at a time, except there's two that we want to consider together because they're so linked. But other than that, it was to go through them one at a time and try to get agreement and then move on to the next one.
So we are going to start by Waleed reading out the goals of the in terms of the social inclusion goals. So just in terms of each slide, what we're presenting is there's a was part, basically how what was before. The new part is the changes we are proposing, and then the reasons why we're changing. So Waleed, did you want to start? We're going to ask you to do this at the stakeholders table as well.
Sure, Adonis. Whatever you folks would like me to do, I will do. Okay, so I'll read the section related to the goals. The goal is so the goal was social inclusion and social cohesion. The new goals that we're recommending for approval is the SDP has overall goals to create a sense of belonging, inclusion, and cohesion that brings Regent Park together as one community and engage in projects and activities to improve the social environment in Regent Park. And the reasons for the change is that this goal further explains that inclusion and cohesion mean one Regent Park inclusive of income, language, culture, age, and indicates that we have projects that benefit the community. Back to you.
So at this point, we would ask anybody who, Michael would take them through a decision-making process around the goals.
Right. So obviously we'd start maybe if anybody doesn't understand or something to that effect, and then we'd say, does everybody agree with this? Can we approve this? And then we'll see if there's anybody doesn't want to approve it, and then we'll go from there. See if we can come up with a quick solution, or if it requires discussion in the room, we could have some time for that, or if we want to send it back to the committee, or if we think we need to vote on it. So one of those outcomes will happen.
So in terms of the planning committee here, is there any objections to or any feedback regarding the goals at all?
Can I ask a quick clarification?
Yeah.
So the big difference I see here from what was there before is that instead of only referring to trying to kind of achieve a high level goal such as inclusion and cohesion, and now we're adding belonging. We're adding the practical piece, the piece about projects and activities. And your reason for doing that is to indicate that we have projects that benefit the community. Can you just talk a bit about why you wanted to add that piece? It sort of adds a dimension to goal that didn't exist before. And so how does this improve the goal by adding this?
Go ahead, Michael, if you want to.
Well, actually, I think the idea for this came from both Adonis and me. So I don't know if we have the same reasons. And that's one thing that in some ways, like writing the reasons section of these slides was almost more difficult because, you can reach an agreement on something even if each person likes it for a different reason. So it's I don't know if I'm speaking for everybody, but the SDP has like these large overall goals and has a lot of specific and individual goals. And I just think it's important to, without listing all of them, to say that the SDP does exist to serve many goals and have many projects and achieve many things. So I don't know if Adonis wants to add anything.
I think that's fine with me. I think that's the objective is to let people know that it's, we have these big goals of social inclusion, belonging, but the other part is that we have these projects and activities that are related to that. that help achieve those goals.
That's helpful for me if I can follow up.
Yes, go ahead.
I just would want to maybe suggest, maybe you considered this, but just it looks to me like it wouldn't be too difficult to merge those into one goal. For example, to engage, I'm not saying this is the best wording exactly, but something like to engage in projects and activities that create a sense of belonging, inclusion, and cohesion, and bring the Regent Park together as one community.
Lovely, Joel, I think.
Well,
So,
I mean, in a way, that does sort of raise the issue. Like one of the reasons I was hoping to see this in here is because all of the working groups, amongst others, committees as well to some extent, but mostly the working groups, have goals, right?
Yeah.
So actually wanted to see it written in such a way that those were not just referenced as examples of the first goals.
Let's just take that feedback and go back, Michael, with that feedback, and then we could discuss it at a later date. So, but you got Joel's feedback around that to put projects, yeah, and activities in the first part. Okay, so let's move on to the second slide. Thanks, Joel. Unless anyone else has anything with that. In this part, which is, I believe Deanie was going to talk about, but we said, okay, so the strategic directions over the course of the next 5 years, this is what we're going to try to do, is create a sense of belonging, inclusion, cohesion that brings Regent Park together as one community, improve the social environment in Regent Park, empower residents and resident groups to set priorities for Regent Park, have equal numbers of TCHC and market residents. And the reasons for having the strategic directions is to provide guidance on what needs to be done across the SDP network, working groups, and committees. So these are the things that we're striving for over the next 3 to 5 years. Any feedback regarding this? Any objections or amendments to this? Okay.
So
I got
before we go on,
Sorry, Froxy,
do
Jack, I
you
just
want
wanna.
to? Is there something on this slide?
Joe has a hand up again. Joe, go ahead.
yes, I'll try not to say too much.
No, go ahead.
Just if you could say a bit more about 3, what does it mean to empower residents and residents groups to set priorities for Regent Park? I mean, that's a bit different than set priorities for themselves, right? So it's for the community as a whole. Can you unpack that a little?
Yeah, one of the things we talked about was that we wanted to empower resident decision-making and residents groups. We don't really want this to be an agency-led process. So that's what we're striving for, is that we want to empower residents and the residents groups to set the priorities across the SDP. So set the priorities, and maybe it's for Regent Park that you might be, but it's really across the SDP. But go ahead, Michael. You have a
Yeah, no, I did think this meant for Regent Park in the sense of like trying to increase residents' influence over the city or over others that might have some influence over Regent Park. So in other words, that the SDP, of course we would help the residents to have influence over the SDP, but we'd also, as an SDP, we're trying to help the residents have influence, larger influence.
Okay. Well, good comment. The only, maybe adding just empower residents and resident groups to set priorities across in the SDP and across Regent Park or something like that. That's something to consider again. Joel, go ahead.
I'd suggest that this is one of the places where it would probably be better to try to dig a bit deeper. This is one of the areas where our experience already shows us that the city has chosen a different way to have resident voice into the funding priorities, i.e. the funding panel, like who's going to get which proposals are going to be funded. And I think I would suggest that we think that piece through a little bit as we consider our strategic directions. And maybe that's what Michael means by increasing some influence or whatever. But it's just not clear to me that this point, or maybe you've gone through this already and I'm missing it, and you have sort of considered that piece. But I just want to point out that there's other places where priorities for Regent Park as a community are set, and how do we engage with that?
Well, I mean, if those other places, don't think we have a role in it, then that's an issue in itself. But if there is some way to have a role in it, then that becomes that's a matter of how to do it. I don't think that really takes anything away from this being the goal. I mean, there may be a lot of questions in particular situations. How do you do it? Is there already a process by which you can do it? Are you asking for a seat at the table where you don't currently have one, so to speak? I hate that term, but is that what you're asking for? Or you asking to get involved in something you're not currently involved in? Or are you asking, how can we make the residents' voice more heard, or within a process that already exists? But those are practical issues that would have to be considered. But I don't see anything wrong with this being the high-level statement of it. As for funding, we had sort of some separate discussions on funding, which they won't be brought up at this meeting, but whether we want to make them into actual recommendations or just leave them as observations, that could be further considered. But I don't think we should add a specific section in this meeting to discuss funding.
Yeah, and I agree with Michael. These are just guidelines across our whole network that we want groups to strive for. We do want residents to set the priorities of their activities and their needs as well. So, and yes, that will take some discussions and negotiations with various different groups and parties for that to happen, but it's something that we are want while in this strategic directions want everyone to strive for.
Okay, so are we finished with this slide?
Yeah, let's unless
so I
there's
just
any
have a
objections.
very minor process issue, which is the names that you're mentioning for who's going to read each slide. I don't think match the list we made up before. So do you want to go over this list again before the meeting, or just stick with the list that I originally had, or what do you want to?
No, let's just stick with the list. Let's just stick with the list we originally had. Sorry, and
all right.
It's just that some members aren't here, so I'm just filling in.
All right. So so then we get on to the next two slides, which are the major changes within the decision-making process in the SDP that could generate the most discussion. I think those are next. I don't think there's anything else before decision-making now,
No.
right?
Yeah.
So we want to present both of these because it's sort of like you can't really do one without the other. So we're going to present both of them and then go to the approval for both of them, or for each one if necessary. But we want to have them both presented before discussing them.
So, did you want to walk us through the first one? Or should I just do them both?
So I don't have the text in front of me.
Okay.
So
before,
as we're just reading it, somebody else can do that.
Sure, I'll read it. So before the stakeholders table, as you know, made major decisions for the SDP. What we're proposing as new is the stakeholders table is for all stakeholders, including residents and organizations, But the change is, its purpose is engagement and consultation and information sharing. Essentially, and the reasons for doing that is most decisions were being made by the planning committee because the planning committee was able to give more detailed considerations to things that needed to have decisions, and the planning committee met more frequently. And what we instead changed the process where because the stakeholder table only meets a few times a year, that this would be an opportunity to engage community over what we're doing, how we're doing it, more of a report back, but more also listening to the community about what they want to see and what they want to see happen in the SDP. So it's more of a information sharing, consultation, engagement, and trying to engage them into the working groups and to be on the planning committee as well, but to be involved in the working groups and projects that we're carrying out, and for them to understand that. The second, let's go to the next slide because we're considering these two slides together. The next is a planning committee, which the main role was to do coordination and alignment and make time-sensitive decisions. What's new is the planning committee is going to make this, we're proposing is the planning committee makes decisions for the SDP, receives updates from the working groups and committees, and is responsible for coordination and alignment, resource, strategic planning, monitoring, evaluation, data management, and maintaining documents. The other SDP committees will now be subcommittees of the planning committee. So we used to have some of the subcommittees being steering committees. Now we are planning to make them, as part of this process, they will be subcommittees of the planning committee. And again, the reasons for the change is that we want the planning committee to increase the role and participation of residents in decision-making. And therefore, the planning committee can become the decision-making body. Again, most decisions were being made by the planning committee before. So this, because the planning committee meets, as you know, weekly at this point, it is able to give more consideration of members as well. So those are the major changes around the planning. There's another slide that we should tell you about before we move on, but the other part of this process is we are trying to open it up so that more members become part of the planning committee, and you'll see that in the next slide. Any concerns, questions? So this is one of the major changes, right? Because we all know that the stakeholders table was the official decision-making body of the group. Now it's going to be the planning committee. I hear Michael, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, we're probably not going to get any real criticism here, but, you know, I don't know what people will say at the stakeholders table. So
the planning committee membership was never really solidified in terms of who participates on the planning committee. What we have now changed it to was that all active residents and organization members of each working group and committee can be on the planning committee as voting members. At least half of the voting members on the planning committee from each working group or committee must be residents. Representation from all working groups and committees is required at the planning committee. So if there is a working group, we want you to have representation on there, and then we want at least, if there's an agency member, we want at least one resident to be on, a minimum of one resident as well, to be on it as a voting resident, a voting member of the committee. The City of Toronto should be on there, TCAC, the Executive Network, and other residents and organizations who are not active on the working groups. So even if you're not active, you could still participate on the planning committee as non-voting members. The other thing I want to say, so there's no minimum, well, obviously the minimum is we want at least one representation from a working group. And if it's only the agency, then we would require two. One of them would have to be a resident. But there's no limits as to how many people can participate on the planning committee as long as voting members, as long as they're active.
Right,
But
and we
I
thought
think-
it might be necessary to have a definition of active, although personally I find that fairly self-explanatory, but we thought that at a later stage, we can put in a definition.
So I said that there would be a minimum, but basically we're saying if you want to bring 5 or 6 residents from your committee, or sorry, 6 representatives from your working group to the planning committee, half of them, 3, should be residents of Regent Park. That's really what we're saying in this. You want to bring 10, great. 5 of them should be residents of Regent Park. As active members, keep in mind, as voting members.
Right.
Otherwise, they can come as and participate. Anybody can come and participate. There's no barriers.
And so the reason we use the phrase active members is that we had some strong opinion to the effect that people do not need to be like vetted or approved by the working group. It's the members of the working group, by being members of the working group. That's how they get to qualify.
So those are the 3 major changes. And the stakeholders table is is more of a engagement, information series, consultation table. They meet a few times a year. The planning committee will continue to meet more on a regular basis, made up of all the representation of the working groups. It's open to anybody to participate. It's only when voting comes that there are some limits around that. But the planning committee will be the decision makers of the SDP. Any objections on the planning committee around any of these 3 items? Joe, go ahead.
Again, not an objection, but well, I don't think it's an objection. It seems to me that you've put a few different sort of categories together on this slide. So planning committee membership as such was not specified, but a lot of these things about voting and decision making were specified before. So there's I wonder if it might be useful to put some of that decision making stuff that was already there. I know it would make the slide bigger. Maybe you divided the slide into 2 pieces. Because I think it makes it sound like a lot of this is really new. At least that's the way that I would sort of receive this information, I think. It might be useful to show some of the actual change that's happening in terms of decision making.
Right. So what it shows here is the change. That is, who counts as a voting member. The actual voting procedures won't change. That is, having 1 vote for residents and then a second round including residents and organizations, that's not changing. So I'm not sure if we should display that, because actually that's not changing.
Yeah, there's no change with how we vote or how decisions are actually made. But maybe we could say in terms of the was, maybe add a consensus, that piece in there maybe.
Well, I could add it to the decision-making slide at the front, but I didn't want to like
Yeah.
overcomplicate it. I think if we need to have a vote, we can explain that.
I think that would probably, I would suggest that it would be very good to put in here something that points to consensus decision making, because I think that's going to be a point that a lot of people looking at this are just not even they're not going to remember that it's consensus decision making, and they'll think that the only people that can contribute to decisions are the voting members.
All right, maybe just a line saying
Decisions were
the
reached.
planning, like all groups, including the planning committee within the SDP, attempt to make decisions with consensus. The distinction between voting and non-voting members only applies when there is a vote.
Okay.
I have a simpler way to suggest.
Go ahead, Joe.
Non-voting members can participate in the consensus decision-making process. I think that's the same spirit, but maybe not. Anyway, we don't need to work it out right now.
Yeah, let's consider that too. Both of those things. Okay, let's move on unless there's any other feedback or objections. Okay, next slide, Brandy. New working groups. So before there's 4 working groups: safety, community building, employment, and economic development and communication. The change that we're proposing is that new working groups can be created. Any resident and organizations that operate in Regent Park to improve the social environment of Regent Park and are aligned with the social inclusion and cohesion in their many aspects can become a working group. Working groups will follow the SDP terms of reference procedure, and that they also have to have co-chairs, that they have to be open to residents and market residents, and so forth. And the reason, again, for those changes is to increase the relevance and responsiveness of the SDP, to engage linguistic and cultural groups, youth, seniors, and other marginalized people who want to become working groups, to work on issues, collective issues, and needs around their own priorities. Any thoughts, any feedback, any objections? So essentially, there will be more than just 4 working groups. It could be as much as 10, for instance.
Yeah, I don't know if we need to add any more at this point. I mean, we could, for example, say that there seems to be a strong desire to have a youth working group.
Yeah.
Just to give an example.
Right. Okay, let's move on unless there's any objections to this. Co-chairs. So there are currently 4 SDP stakeholder table co-chairs, 2 resident representatives from RPNA, 1 TCHC resident and 1 market resident. And then we have 1 representative from the Regent Park Executive Directors Network and 1 resident from TCHC Tenant Council. So the new part of this is that we haven't changed the co-chairs. What we're asking is that each of these organizations will, for transparency, inform the planning committee of the procedures it uses to select the SDP co-chairs. And the planning committee can only refuse to accept the co-chairs if the procedures were not followed. Working group organizations are agency co-chairs. The role is, we want their role is to support the resident co-chairs. And then the reason for changing is to have confidence in the process, accountability to the organizations that appoint the co-chairs, transparency to the SDP, and then increase the role of residents. Questions? Go ahead, Marlene.
Yeah, who is setting the procedure? Or are you assuming that each organization is going to set their own procedure?
Well,
It should be the same procedure for everyone.
no, so RPNA sets their own procedures for appointing the co-chairs. TCAC Tenant Council will set their procedure for appointing the resident co-chair. The Regent Park Executive Network will have their own procedures for selecting. They just have to inform us what those
What the
procedures are.
procedure is. Okay.
Miguel,
I was aware that the Region Park Tenant Council no longer exists, and we have asked Felicia White from DCAC to come and give us an overview of their new tenant engagement process, which has removed the tenant council of Regent Park. Currently, we have had discussions at the City Planning Committee, providing criticism as to the way TCAC appoints TCAC residents to the Tenant Advisory Committee. That particular as a group is also under review. So there's a lot of moving parts. They're talking about reintegrating the Tenant Advisory Committee with new members, allowing deputations or participation on the agenda preparation, et cetera, with regards to the tenant council, since no longer exists. I don't know why we are pursuing to ask them to provide their selection process until Felicia White comes to us and provide us that update that is important for the SDP planning to understand. Thank you.
I'm going to go to Waleed.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
For this,
So Miguel, I
ahead,
appreciate.
Waleed.
Yeah, Miguel, I appreciate where you're coming from, but I just want to let you know that we have formally made that request to Felicia White to present on the changes, but also to note that on December 5th at the Planning and Housing Committee, there will be an update on this new representative model. I hope that you will consider registering to depute and sharing your thoughts at that meeting. It's I just checked the city council meeting schedule, and it is slotted in. I'm assuming it's going to be slotted into that meeting December 5th. This is a council motion or a planning and housing committee motion that asks the CC to report back by the end of this year. So that's December 5th. Mark that in your calendar. And what we can do is we can follow up with Felicia either after the stakeholders meeting, because it's just a week away. So that will mean that the Thursday we might have to, because we're having meetings next week, the week after, maybe on the 5th itself, after the planning and housing committee meeting addresses this agenda item in the morning, maybe later on during the meeting, she could come and present to what will be shared publicly on the 5th. And maybe your deputation and the influence of other councillors could change the outcome of whatever is presented. So let's just wait until what they're able to present on the 5th, and then have conversations with TCHC senior management on the importance of a democratic and open process by which tenants are representing their interests. Thank you.
Okay, so because we're waiting for that information report from Felicia White, why don't we just put this item on hold or for debate at a future SDP stakeholders table?
We don't, because we don't need to. If this is passed, the planning committee can make that decision. So we don't have to wait 3 or 4 months for the stakeholder table to meet.
Yeah, I'm strongly in favor of getting Felicia to talk to us as soon as possible. But, we had a lot of other items coming up on our planning committee agendas. I mean, we had other people like the mediators that we had to get to a meeting, right? So we do need to hear from Felicia as soon as possible. And we can always change this if we need to, but I wouldn't like to delete the position just because it might change. We've understood for a long time now that it's going to change,
Yeah.
and we still wanted to keep it in some form or other. If eventually we decide we want to get rid of it because we just don't like the way it's gone, then we can. But I would say it's too early to remove it.
Okay. So any other objections or feedback before we go to the next slide? We're running out of time, folks. Let's go to the next slide unless there's anyone. For the conflict, so the next slide is conflict resolution. It was that the shaping culture had procedures, including conflict resolution, was adopted for a trial period. What we are now doing is shaping the SDP culture will now be included in the terms of reference. We also plan to increase our capacity in conflict resolution, mediation, and responding to trauma. And then we have a thing where the SDP administrative assistant position will help members navigate the conflict resolution process and help members fill out reports on incidents that will be given back to the working group or committees where the issue arose. So what we're trying to do is increase more use of the conflict resolution process, have a place where we could document incidents that come up and be able to go back to the committee and get the committee to work with the members who are in conflict with each other or require mediation. I'm waiting for McGill.
Yes, correct. That is one of the things I've been pushing forward because this is really important, so that we can have meaningful discussions and set aside any conflict away from the general discussion, so that we can make proper decisions and not being influenced by disagreements among members. Yes, I'm a big supporter of this. Since larger organizations, they have also faced similar situations, and they have been able to move forward as a community and heal the community and make it better for everybody. Yeah, for sure.
Great. Okay. Saying that, let's move forward to unless anything else, let's move forward to the next slide.
I mean, the only thing I would add about conflict resolution is that some people have expressed that they don't like the process of mediation, and I think we should be prepared to offer them other ways rather than just saying they refused mediation and that's the end of it. So there are various forms of shuttle diplomacy which can still work like mediation without looking a lot like the traditional forms of mediation.
Okay. So in terms of wrapping up this piece, we have a next steps, which essentially the planning committee, as we presented. We just want to, since we approved all the slides and got feedback from ones that we will consider, we want to be able to present the slides with some minor revisions to the November 27th meeting. Again, Michael described the process in which we will go through the slides, and then if there are objections to that and that are going to hold us back, that we will have those discussions in small groups. And while we would move on and then come back and have those discussions where slides that people object to, have small group discussions around them. And then come
Okay,
back
but there is
again.
one more thing, which is that after those slides, the next slide is the next steps, which would be then be the steps after November 27th.
Yes.
So that also is going to be presented on November 27th, which is
Yes.
the following steps that happen after that meeting.
So yes, so what we're hoping is that the working groups will review the suggested changes and will come up with continual work on their group activities, continue to work with the community around members, our residents who want to set up new working groups. And then once the November 27th meeting is, we will begin to talk to the city around the changes that we have proposed and how they fit with the refresh are where we will have discussions and negotiations around. So essentially that's where we're at.
Okay. So from today's meeting, I heard two things which were just simple clarifications, which I think are very easy to add. There was one thing in the goals that is more of a change than just a clarification. If we have a chance to have another meeting before November 27th, I guess we can rediscuss some of that. I mean, personally, I prefer to keep it as it is currently, but if we get a chance to discuss that before then, we can. I don't know what will come out of that, suppose people can still bring things up on the day of.
Exactly.
Should we schedule a strategic planning meeting for Monday?
Or Tuesday, why don't we do Tuesday?
Continue to finalize these things. Tuesday is going to be pretty difficult, I think, but if you want to do it Tuesday, we can.
Okay.
Well, there's one thing. So
actually, I'd rather do it on Monday because, like, well, Tuesday is going to be extremely busy one way or the other, but.
Yeah, we can make the changes, Michael, but this document should go as is because it has to go out to the stakeholders table.
Okay.
Yeah, notice. It's notice revisions. We have to.
And then we could just put another slide together in terms of.
Yeah, no, of course we could. I'm just wondering if we need a meeting. Anyways, because I don't know what else we will come up, and we probably have some more sort of planning for the process. I mean, I suppose we could just go straight to November 27th.
Well, let's meet on Monday then. Let's meet up Monday at 10 or 10:30. Let's put out is that okay, Waleed, to put out a meeting?
Yeah, 11 o'clock. I have a meeting.
11 o'clock on Monday. Okay, we'll do that.
Okay.
So what else is there? Okay, so for stuff to go out before
this will go out.
Basically right now.
Yeah.
So I had another document there that had a proposed meeting package, which is more text oriented. Like I didn't think the actual slides would be sent, but same stuff in text form. Or I suppose we could just send the actual slides.
I think we should just send the actual slides, Michael.
Yeah.
Because that's what we're presenting.
Exactly. And I see a nice comment from Joel. Good job, folks. I like a lot of the ideas. Thank you, Joel. That's really kind of you. And I just want to thank Michael Adonis for this presentation. Brandy, I know you're with us, but this is pivotal important. We need to send out this package and a reminder to everyone who's showing up to the stakeholders table, including the co-chairs of the working groups, so they could circulate to their members so that they have this document in advance of the meeting.
Brandy, just the presentation, the slideshow.
And Brandy, you have access to this to the registration form. Could you just confirm that?
Yes, I can confirm that.
Yeah, because it's 16 or 17 people that registered.
Yep.
So you have the email contacts directly on that Excel sheet.
Yep, no problem.
Amazing.
So
Okay.
don't we have a larger like list, not
Yeah, we
just
do.
the people who registered for the meeting, but like to put out a meeting notice
Yeah.
and attach this to it?
Yeah, we can certainly do that. It's also on social media. It's
Well-
on the RPNA discussion group. It's on WhatsApp. People know that the meeting is happening next week on the 27th. I think we're going to have a good turnout.
I think so.
Um, okay, so I just want to make some quick announcements before we end the meeting at 7:10. So thank you, Adonis. Thank you, Michael.
Yeah.
The first very important announcement, this just came in. So most of you might not have seen this email, but it was sent out by TCHC. So I'll share the screen. This is very important. On Monday, I'm gonna miss a portion of this meeting because of work, but on Monday, December 2nd, there'll be a Regent Park community update meeting related to the rezoning application because it's going to go to City Council on the 4th. So it's 2 days prior to the City Council meeting, and it will focus on the revite, upcoming buildings, community engagement, jobs and training. Miguel, this is an important meeting for you to attend since you are very passionate about community benefits, just like many of us. So this is happening at the community center from 6 o'clock to 9. I'll probably join you around 8 o'clock because of other commitments, but hope to catch the last hour.
All right, I'll be there earlier.
Awesome. Let's touch base with other board members and other community leaders prior to this meeting. So the issue of home ownership and other matters are raised. So that's the first announcement. The second announcement is tomorrow. Please don't forget, there is an SDP refresh listening session, and it's open to all Regent Park residents, and it's at the community center, and it's from 5:30 p.m. to 7 o'clock. So please don't forget about that. That's tomorrow, November 22nd, which is ironically National Housing Day as well. So please show up to that. The other quick announcement that I want to make, I'll make this last, is on December 4th, there is this really important meeting held by the city, and it is going to be held at the Toronto and East York Community Council. And it's related to the rezoning application for phases 4 and 5. The meeting starts at 10 o'clock in the morning. Please register to depute, and we shall send out an email on how to do that. But just remember, it's a simple email, TEYCC@toronto.ca, or you can give them a call at 416-392-7033, 416-392-7033, no later than 12 o'clock on December 3rd, if you would like to speak to this item. Whether you're in favor of it or not, they will be considering an increase in density of 98 market units. 98 market units. I just want to remind everyone that TCHC said any additional units, they will dedicate half of it to be RGI and half of it to be market. This proposal does not do that. It gives it 100% market units, which makes the balance of 50-50 much harder. So please consider attending this meeting on Wednesday, December 4th. So the other announcement that I want to quickly make is the Regent Park Neighborhood Association had our elections for our officer positions. I just want to confirm the following officers. I'll be serving as chair for TCHC, chair of RPNA. Saleh Sheikh is going to be serving as vice chair. Shahan Chowdhury is going to be serving as president. Shana Omar will be serving as secretary. And Dawar Naim will be serving as treasurer, in addition to Ishmael Afra. So an email will be sent out soon. So please look out for that email, and you know, get involved in your neighborhood association. We will be considering board members in the new year as well. The last thing I want to quickly say is if you go to the RPNA discussion page on Facebook, there's some really awesome upcoming meetings that I want to quickly remind folks about. And I want to thank Julie Chrysler for putting this list together. This could be maybe shared via email. But there are a couple of workshops and networking events. One that just happened earlier, but the next one tomorrow is the listening session, which we talked about. It's mixology night, courtesy of Zero Cocktail Bar. There's Beggar's Banquet, which is also happening. There's a wreath making workshop. There's a Regent Park Film Festival, which is starting on the 28th next week, just after the stakeholders table meeting. So I think we should try to promote that, and a bunch of other events. So please check out the RPNA discussion page for more details on upcoming events in our neighborhood. And I'll stop sharing and I'll give it back to anyone else who wants to make a quick announcement before we end our meeting.
I just think we should also be prepared. It's in January, but there will be city budget deputations on January 21st and 22nd.
Yeah,
That is correct. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think what we can do, Michael and other folks, is get residents to register to make deputations on the 21st when they sign in. And also if they're interested in deputing on the 4th, December 4th, because that's the most important meeting. The one on the 2nd is more of an update from TCHC and Tridel, but decisions will be made on the 4th by members of council. So if people want to depute and speak online, they can do so. I've already was approached by 7 Regent Park residents to date who are going to be deputing online. So I think we're going to have a good list of deputants for the 4th, especially with ongoing outreach.
Yeah, and also to remind the city that we need increased funding for the SDP for the next 4 years.
Yeah. Sounds good. Okay, my friends, it's 7:15. I think our meeting is done. Wonderful planning committee meeting, and thanks to everyone who raised their
And very peaceful, very peaceful. You know what I mean, Walid?
I know what you mean. All right, brother. Take care.
Take care. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Okay, take care.
Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Go follow us on our social media platforms. And for more information, go check out our website.